So I think I'm going to go ahead. So good afternoon again. Thank you all for joining me on this Friday afternoon. If you're on a Friday afternoon, I hope it means that you've completed your deadlines for the week. So without delaying too much, I'm just going to go ahead. So today we're talking about using schedules in Revit as a way to level up on your BIM journey. And before we get into the content, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Nuran, and I am a BIM technical specialist here at Baker Baines, specifically in the build field of the AC industry. I formerly worked as a structural engineer where I did some Revit modeling as well as BIM 360 administrating, and my design experience is in multi-story residential buildings as well as industrial and educational buildings. I'm somewhat new to Baker Baines. I just joined in October. I really enjoy making use of Revit. I enjoy a lot of research and development work. So I've sort of merged the two. So I'm doing basically research and training and things in the industry that I've been trained. So that's about me, and then a little bit about Baker Baines. Some of you might be familiar with us, but for those of you who are not, we are a company that has basically evolved over the last 5 years, from being an Autodesk reseller to now being a consulting company that really sets out to solve the problems of our customers through digital transformation to help you design and make a better world. There's various things that we offer, which include business process improvement consulting services, survey and design hardware and consulting, design software consulting, and then also something that we are very passionate about is our blended learning approach, as that is the way that we believe that our customers should digest information. Here you can see the various products that we work with, both in selling as well as consulting, Autodesk being the main product, but also in terms of hardware, Topcon and Leica. And then for our learning and virtual training, as well as classroom training, we also make use of CAD learning, which is really powerful and useful, and one of the ways that we encourage our customers to learn as they go along in their journey into improving whichever software it is that they are using. So now that you know a little bit about me and a little bit about Baker Baines, I would like to get to know the audience a bit better. What I'd like to know is if you are a Revit user. So I'm just going to launch a poll, and I would like you to indicate to me if you use Revit or not. Okay, so I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, cool. So it seems most of you have been using Revit on many projects, but there's also a fair amount who has not used Revit but would like to start make use of it. And then there's a few that have used it but on 1 or 2 projects only. Okay, cool. The next thing I want to know is if you actually use schedules to for construction, or use Revit to generate schedules. So I just need to load the next poll, and please let me know, do you generate schedules in Revit for construction? Okay, I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, sweet. Thanks everyone for the responses. Seems like there's almost a 50-50 split between people who use it for some elements and people who don't know how to do that just yet. So cool, you guys are in the right place. You'll see some nice tips and tricks on either how to get started or on what additional features you can start using when generating your schedules. So in terms of agenda and what we're going to cover today, I'll just do a bit of an introduction. And then before getting into the actual details of schedules, I just want to run through some of the new scheduling features that have become available in the last few years, and then also just touch on appearance. Then I'll go into the different types of schedules that are available that you can make use of in Revit. And I will look at some of them in detail, not all of them. And then I'll look at parameters for schedules and then how you can use schedules for quantity tracking. And then just before we end, I'll look at how, oops. Okay, cool. So you guys can now see the agenda, right? Sorry about that. So yeah, after the quantity tracking, I'll then show you guys how you can, just check here, cool. How you can actually make use of these schedules over and over for future projects. Okay, and then we'll do a bit of a recap. Okay. So in my previous webinar, if any of you have joined the last time, I talked about a few different ways that you can enhance the value of your BIM model. And the main idea with that was that the eye in BIM is really what matters to us as design professionals. The information has to be reliable, relevant, and accessible for it to mean anything to anyone. So at the time when you are creating the model, you want to make sure that the information is reliable. And with scheduling in Revit, there are various tools that can be used to then make this information relevant and then accessible and digestible to other people. So for example, if you take this model, it's a highly intelligent model. It has all the structural and services that you require, all the services information that you require. It's all modeled in, but it means nothing to this guy over here. It's kind of a tall ask to go from the beautiful model that you see on screen to an actual real life building. To actually erect the building, we would then typically collate the information from the model in layouts and sections, some details, and to make things even easier from a procurement perspective, we would then produce schedules to tabulate the information in a summarized way so that it then can be used in construction. So then now you'll have this guy being happy. So we know that schedules are not new in the trade, and it has been produced with many different tools. People have their preferences, but for today, I just would like to highlight a few tools that are available in Revit, and that based on this webinar, you can adapt from what you see today and hopefully implement it in your workflow, whichever way suits your team. So also when it comes to schedules, there's also usually some standard around the presentation of the schedule. So whether that be a company standard or the SABS standards. So I just want to cover like different modifying tools that are available that you can use to customize your schedule so that it looks like something that suits your standards, because the schedules look very boring as is. When you produce them in Revit, they need a little bit of work to make them look the way that you want them to look. So I just want to talk about some newer features. So these three main features that have been added. So if you've been working on Revit before 2018, you wouldn't have been familiar with this, but it's simple things like zooming in and out, freezing or unfreezing the headers, and then striping rows. So for those who have not seen schedules in Revit, you've seen schedules before, so this shouldn't be too foreign, but I'll also try and do a little bit of an intro as we go along. So what you're seeing on screen is a typical schedule that you might find. If you have a very long schedule, you might have some trouble reading it and presenting it. So there's a few things. Sometimes you might want to zoom in and out. This was introduced about 2018 or 2019. It wasn't always possible to do. And then freezing headers, much the same like Excel. This was also something that was introduced in around 2020, I think. And then in 2021, shading was introduced. So sometimes when you have really large models, you might want to shade alternate rows just to make it a bit easier to read. So that is also possible, and you can include this on your sheet once you print it, or you can select to not include this and just have it appear like this on your screen. So, like I said, it's very basic, but if you worked on the Revit 2018 and you didn't have access to this, you might have found it quite frustrating. And these things are particularly helpful when you're working with larger schedules. Another issue you might run into when you're working with larger schedules is that you're not able to fit it on one sheet. So what you could also do is, once you've opened up a sheet in Revit and you drag your schedule over, you can see it's quite big. It doesn't really fit on the page. So what you can do is you can actually split the schedule and then have the various segments placed on the sheet next to each other. And then there's a little blue dot at the bottom that you can drag. And as you are reducing the one column, that information is being spilled over to the other side. And then again, you can just keep on splitting and adjusting until it suits the size of your page. So at this stage, you are not able to split the schedule and then paste the segments on separate sheets. But in Revit 2021, that feature has been allowed. So you will then be able to split the schedule and then put it on various sheets if it were to be even longer than this. Okay. Another feature that might be useful when trying to customize your schedule to suit your standards is grouping headers. So to do this, you would basically highlight the headers that you want to group, and there's a little group button that becomes available, and very much like Excel, you can select the various cells and type in a name. Okay. So in terms of more formatting and schedule appearance, there's a few other things you can do. So I'm going to walk through this and try and explain the different tools that are available. There's a few different things that you can do. Some of them you can leave by default. So as you go along, you can decide what is applicable for you. So this is a room finish schedule. And you might want to make some adjustments. You can add some data columns, and in this little window, you can select fields that you want to add. Now you see you've got some more columns. You can then also shade the column, so you can select one whole column and apply a certain color to it. Conditional formatting is also quite nice. I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but especially if you want to do like checking in this example, checking that which room areas are greater than 100, which was maybe specified right at the beginning, and you can see those two at the bottom is highlighted because the area is bigger than 100. And then over here, every second row has been colored to turquoise. You can also add rows into headings, and this allows you to customize the information that you see in the heading. If you want to add a logo, you can do something like that in the heading. You can type in an exact size as well. You can rename the schedule so that it's more suitable to what's on your sheet, and then also use the regular adjustment and font tools. Same for borders with various line thicknesses. So this is really just a presentation in terms of making it readable, and then also using conditional formatting to highlight critical information on your schedule. It's also another thing that is also quite useful, and this would be like in the case of if you have a door schedule, you sometimes might want to combine different parameters into one cell. And in this example, we'll look at how to do that. So this is the door schedule, and you can see that the size of the door is given by the width and the height, which are in separate columns, because that is the way that the information is stored in Revit. Width and height are separate parameters. But traditionally, we would just have like width times height, or height times width times thickness in one column. So by selecting combine parameter, you can select the various parameters that you would like to combine. So starting with height, then thickness and width, add that. And then you can also rearrange them so that they appear in the correct order. And by default, the slash is used as a separator, but it's fully editable. So you can add like a little cross so that the value reads height by width by thickness. And you can see at the bottom that there's a preview as well of how it will appear. You can also add a suffix, so something like units is usually useful, and then give it a name. So this is now a new parameter that will get added to the schedule. We no longer need height and width separately. So we'll take that out and move the parameter we just created to the top. And now you can see that the size of the door is indicated in one cell, and all that information is read from the height and the width of the door itself. Okay, so that's just things regarding the way that schedules look. So next I'm going to go into the different types of schedules. So there are various kinds, and in terms of appearance, the appearance functions that we just saw can be used for all types of schedules. So the types of schedules you would find when you go to the View tab and then you drop down on the Schedules tab. These are the different kinds that are available. The one that is most commonly used is schedule or quantities. So that is when you want to create a schedule for beam elements or door elements or conduit, various or ducting or basically anything that you just need to present on a schedule for ordering and construction purposes. You then get graphical column schedule, so that shows you basically the height of each and every column at each and every level of your building. Then there is material takeoffs, which is quite useful for to add up the quantities of the materials of the various elements. You can also create sheet lists, note blocks, and view lists, which are also quite similar to sheet lists. Another type of schedule is revision schedule. So these are the schedules that are available on the title block. And then there's also panel schedules that is available on the systems tab. So the building component schedule, that is a type of quantity schedule. That's the one that's used the most. But one of the things that I would advise when you are creating schedules, you might find at the end of the project that you have a really large number of schedules. So to make it easy to work with, I would advise using the project browser organization and organizing it by the schedule type so that it's a bit easier to filter through and find the schedules that you're looking for. So I won't be going into that into detail, but my colleague Anin, she did do a webinar on how to customize your browser settings. So you could always check it out there. And this is also another alternative of how to organize your browser schedule so that it's easy to find your schedule. So here you can see that it's been filtered according to the schedule type, and then within the schedule type, it's also filtered according to the type or the view template, sorry, the view template. So we've got building component schedules, we've got and then we've got the concrete and rebar subheadings, and then for material takeoffs we've got concrete and steel, and of course whatever other materials you could also add that as well. And then for the note block schedules, which I'll go into detail soon, you can then show, okay, I know now this is for details, and this shows brickwork foundation and waterproofing details. So the first one to talk about is the material takeoffs. So this is useful when you want to provide details such as the material type, the quantity, and the cost for the materials in the model. So information such as the area and the volume is calculated straight from the model itself, and you can then present it in your schedule and create one or two custom calculated fields to either show the cost per square, total cost, or anything else that might be relevant. You can also specify manufacturer information. And here you can see also that images have been added. I'll show you how to do that in a bit. And this can be used for anything, even for like rendering images, or maybe even your door schedules, rebar shapes, whatever you really need to show an image of. Something else that is quite useful is the annotation schedules that are used to create note blocks. So in this scenario, instead of adding tags to each of these elements, you can give each element a number and then create a little table that describes what is happening at each number or each index. Okay, so to do this, you would need to have a type of label. This is can also be customized. In this label, the text and the sheet number or the sheet name is going to be included. So once that tag has been loaded, you can now add it to your drawing. So it doesn't get pre-populated with anything. These fields have to be typed in. So here you'll specify the index of each of it, as well as the description and the sheet on which that information is, but then switch that information off so that only the index number shows. And then you'll go to the View tab, go to Schedules, Note Block. You can give the note block a name. And then include the parameters that you want to see in your table. Sort them according to the index. Hit OK. And now you can see a nice neat table of the index and the description of each element and which sheet you can find more information. This allows you to also filter which sheets you want, or the information from which sheets you want to include. And that's a nice, neat way to present some additional information on your drawing without cluttering it with too much text. The next type of schedule that you can create is a sheet and a view list schedule. So when you go to the View tab and hit the Schedule button, you'll see there is a sheet list. For the sheet list, we want to indicate the sheet number as well as the sheet name. Hit OK. And this is all the sheets that have been created. What's nice about this is you can also create placeholders for your sheets. So if you know that you need to produce a particular sheet at some stage, but only a bit later on, you can then insert a data row and then fill in the sheet number as well as the name. And this helps you to just organize your sheet numbers very well so that it's logical, and you can also then keep track of your information and your documentation. You can also add additional fields that can help you to filter and sort your sheets. So you might have various sheets that belong to different people or belong to different disciplines. So by adding the designed by parameter and sorting it according to the person or department responsible for it, you need to just fill this in, and then you can see that now you can organize and separate the various sheets according to who is responsible for the sheet. And then you can also add additional parameters if you want to sort it even further. Often it's not that necessary. And then these parameters can then be hidden, so you won't need this to be shown in your title, in your schedule, but you do need it for sorting. So now you can see, you can then just drag and paste that schedule onto the sheet. The lines are not shown here because they were switched off in the formatting, but that is of course a preference. And here you can see this drawing, for example, there's no sheet that was created already, but that was a placeholder. So what's nice is that when you get to the point of creating the sheet, you can then select that placeholder that you created, and the information is actually populated in that new title block. So that's quite cool. So if you are someone that is a bit neurotic about numbering your sheets and having everything systematic, that can really help you to create placeholders and then use the placeholders when you actually get to creating the sheet. So I didn't talk about quantity or building component schedules, you would have noticed, because that's the one that people use most often. What I do want to talk about is embedded schedules and key schedules, which are both a type of quantity schedule. So embedded schedules are schedules, it's basically when you put one schedule inside of another schedule, right? The one schedule is embedded in the other one. But what's specific about this one is that it can only be used with rooms, spaces, and system schedules. So the room, space, and system schedules would be your parent schedule, and then you would create another schedule and place it inside one of those three. So when you when you create a room space or system schedule, you'll see that there's this additional tab right at the end called embedded schedule that you can use. So for things like structural beams or columns, this tab is not available. And by default, it will be switched off. But once you tick it, there'll be a list of categories that you can choose from. And this is basically telling you that you can add or you can embed this type of schedule into your room schedule, for example. So of this. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is embed a furniture schedule inside a room schedule. And once you choose the embedded schedule properties, your typical schedule properties palette comes up, where you would then add parameters that you want to include in your schedule, pretty much in the same way if you were to create just a furniture schedule on its own. And then the main thing to keep in mind is when you're creating embedded schedules, you're basically just trying to find out, what is inside a space, what is inside a room, or what is inside a system. And the system that we're referring to here is like your ducting systems, piping systems, or electrical circuits. So for example, you might have an office room, so you can embed a furniture schedule inside a room schedule. You might have various rooms that have different types of furniture, so you're able to collate that. Same goes for lighting fixtures inside a particular room, and then also any ducting that might be in a particular space. Okay. So key schedules is the other type of quantity schedule that you can use. When you create a new schedule, by default, scheduling by building components is selected. But once you select schedule keys, then the fields on the right become active. They are basically, key schedules is basically a list of elements that have information that's not automatically assigned to elements in Revit. And where you would use it is if you want to automate the addition of consistent information. An example of something like that would be if you had a particular room in, let's say, a multi-story residential building. You've got bathrooms, you've got bedrooms, and you've got corridors. And if you were to think about the finishes in each of the rooms, ceiling, floor, and wall finish, they might be consistent for all bathrooms, for all bedrooms, or for all corridors. So key schedules helps you to populate this information for all the bathrooms and for all the bedrooms and for all the corridors without having to include that finished information for each and every single one. So if this was the finishes that you expect for each type of room, and you were to create a room schedule by selecting the room style. So here you can see that we've got an ensuite, we've got a guest bathroom, a public bathroom, a guest bedroom, master bedroom, and then there's two different types of corridors. So we can then categorize all the bathrooms to have the same bedrooms, the same style, because they're all bedrooms, and all the corridors have the same room style. And then you can see now that the information next to it regarding the finishes is basically a snip of the key schedule inside the quantity schedule. So I will just show another example of how to actually achieve that. So this is an example of another multi-story building that has got something like 170 different rooms. So on level 1, there's 36, level 2, there's 67 rooms, and level 3 is another 67 rooms. And you can also see the various types of rooms that they are on each level. And here, perhaps I would like to specify the floor, base, wall, and ceiling finish for each. So I can type that information in. So let's say I'm having carpet 1, hardwood floors in the living room, and tiles in the entryway. For the master bedroom, I can then just use the drop down to populate. So it kind of tries to make it a bit quicker, but you can imagine for 170 rooms with 4 different types of finishes, it might take some time. So this is an example where you can use key schedules to make this a bit quicker and automate this information. So a key schedule is a type of quantity schedule. So once you select your room schedule, you just need to make sure that you tick schedule keys and then give it a name. So this is regarding the finishes. So we'll add the types of finishes that we want to include in our key schedule, and in the same order. So that's the floor finish, the base finish, the wall finish, and the ceiling finish. Okay, and so it's not populated yet, there's no information. So because this is just data rows, it's not linked to any elements in the model, we can just insert data rows for each key. So the first one is going to be public spaces. So public spaces, private spaces, which would be your bedrooms, and then living spaces. So in all the living areas, you might want one type of floor finish. So all the living spaces are having hardwood floors, all the private spaces are having carpets, and all the public spaces are having tiles. Okay, same with the base finish. And then the wall finish, different kinds of paint perhaps. And then the ceiling, we can have chipboard and then maybe some type of acoustic tile in the public spaces. Okay. So now that we have the style, we need to apply the style to each room. Okay, and here you can see now that we've got the parameter for the style, and those are the different keys that we just created. So you could go one by one and select the style. You can see it then automatically populates the finish style, but still for 170 different types of rooms, it's going to take some time. So to overcome that, another schedule was created. This is just for background work. And here you can see the rooms have been condensed now a bit more to all bedrooms, all bathrooms, all closets, all common rooms, and not individual items. So now we'll add the room style finish that we just created for the key schedule. And then specify what the style of this room is. So all the bedrooms are private spaces, the living rooms is living spaces, and the entry hallways are public spaces. And you can see when the room style is selected, the finishes are updated as well. You can also override or add additional types of finishes if you wanted to. So that would be for rooms that you don't necessarily need to create a key for, because there's maybe only one or two of them. Okay, and then you can go on and you can specify the room style for each of those types of rooms, and in that way all the finishes for all of your 170 rooms can be populated in a fraction of the time. Okay, so in some of the examples that you've seen, a lot of the parameters that are predefined for the various elements are used, but sometimes you want to create customized parameters. For whatever scenario it is that you might want to schedule. And it helps you also then to organize and manage the information the way that you are used to. So many of you might already know how to do this, but I'll just give a brief summary of what the different types of parameters is, what's available in Revit, and then also show some examples of how you can create custom parameters and then use them in your schedules. So there's basically 4 types of parameters: global parameters, project parameters, type parameters, and shape parameters. So starting with global parameters, it's basically a parameter that can be used in multiple projects. So things like the cost of concrete or the cost of bricks, that's a global parameter because that value is the same for all projects that you work on. You might then have individual projects that have parameters that are specific to that project. So you might have project 1 that is a load-bearing brickwork project. So the project parameters that you might want to create there are specific to brickwork. The next one might be a concrete building, so you'll have project parameters that relate to concrete, and another project might be a steel building, and your parameters would be specific to that project. And then also just another recap is that each of these projects are then made up of various elements that belong to various categories. So the categories could be like doors, windows, walls, beams, columns, and the like. And then each of the categories can then be divided into various families. So in the case of the store that you're seeing on the screen, you can have an internal single door, internal double door. You can have glass doors, sliding doors. Those are all different families, and then variations of each of those doors in terms of size or material would be the different types. And then each element as they appear in the model is your instance. So when you are looking at the information at the various levels, whether it be the family, the type, or the instance, that's also types of parameters that exist. So various families will have family parameters that are applicable to that entire family. So a single door parameter dimensions will be different to a double door's parameter dimensions. And then the last one is the shared parameters. And then with shared parameters, there's two types. You get type shared parameters and instance shared parameters. So this is a very quick and dirty explanation of parameters that are available, but it can be, this is something that you would create as you need it. And one of the things that can be, or one of the nice ways that you can use parameters in your schedules is with images. So in this example, you'll see how images can be added to schedules by making use of either type or instance parameters. So the images here are both the system parameters, meaning that they are already preloaded in Revit. So let's have a look and see how you can create a furniture schedule with images. So this is a schedule of some chairs that you can see here. And when you select it, you'll see that there's an image parameter. When you go to edit type, there's a type image parameter. So all elements in Revit have an image parameter and a type image parameter. So you would need to decide where you want to add the image. For the type image, you would need to go into the family editor. And then over here, you can add the images. The file types are like the normal JPEG and PNG files. And then once that is loaded, you can add it to your project. And then when you go to schedules, create a new schedule, go down to furniture, add the parameters that you want, as well as the type image parameter, do your sorting. And you can see now that the schedule just shows the name of the file. To be able to see the image, you first have to place it on the actual sheet. Once you place it, the image becomes available. And you can see that the column sizes or the row sizes, you can adjust them by dragging it, but you can also see that the size of the rows are varying. You can sort of standardize it by using the resize button. So now you can see that the rows are equal in size, but because of the aspect ratio of the various chairs, they are not all the same. So you can also just switch back to the default. So when it comes to images in schedules, there's three different types of images that you can add. So the first is called a type image. This is a type parameter and it lives in the family. Then you get an image parameter. This is an instance parameter and it lives in the project. So you can add images either way. So I think what's important to know is that if you use the type image in the one that lives inside the family, that kind of will increase the size of your family, but it also will require less work, because when you add an image as an instance parameter, that means that you need to add an image for each and every single element that you have in your model. So it really depends. on which elements need images, but important to note is that one lives inside the family and one lives inside the project. And then the third type of image that is available is shape image. So this is a type parameter that is specific for rebar shapes, and it also lives inside the family. So you'll see that once you upload the image, you get this little summary, and you can see a preview of the image that is actually added. So another way of leveraging the power of schedules is to use it for quantity tracking. So as the designer of your particular field, you might need to make some estimates for costing or for planning at the beginning of a project. And at some stage, you might have to compare this information that was issued for construction with the estimates to see if you have remained reasonably within those estimates. So whether you want to do that for value engineering, or because it's just good practice, or maybe the QS is on your case, if you have the right information in your model, you can do this very well. So the next example is a particularly structural one. It's looking at assigning rebar estimates for reinforced concrete beams, but similar procedures can be followed and adapted to your specific purpose. So here we have a schedule of different types of beams that I'm expecting to have in a 3-story concrete building at concept stage. So it's a fairly simple building, but what's nice is when you select any element in the schedule and go to highlight in model, you can actually filter through different views to see the position of those elements. So I'll go B2, highlight, click on show to cycle through to the next view. 3D is quite nice, so you can orbit and see the position of those elements. So that's all the B2 beams, kind of like the secondary beams on the wings of the building. And then if I go back to the schedule and select B3, highlighting model, you can see that B3 is the secondary beams on the back of the building. Okay, so those are the 3 beams in the very simple building. So I'm guessing, okay, if B1 is kind of like the primary beam, maybe I will make an estimated guess and say, okay, I'll probably end up having 2 Y22s. B3, I don't need that heavy rebar, so probably just 2 Y16s. And this is all text, it's not actual information relating to the model, because at this stage it's just like a quick rough estimate. So the next thing I want to do is create another project parameter, and this one is going to be for my rebar estimates. So I'll give it a name. Okay, this is a mass density. It's a type parameter, and I want to be able to use it in columns, foundations, as well as framing. I'll just hit OK here for now. And go OK. So now I've created a parameter, and if I now go to one of my beams, so let's say the primary beam B1, I can go and find that parameter that I just created. It's a type parameter, so I will find it in edit type. And here you can see rebar estimates is the parameter I just created. I can give it a value. It's I'm going to guess 150 kilograms per cubic meter. Quite heavy. Probably won't end up being that much, but just for demonstration purposes, we'll leave it like that. And then move on to the next beam, B2. If I go to edit type, I can see at the bottom the parameter I just created and give it a value. Let's say it's a bit lighter, so 120. And now when I go to the schedule, and I can now go to my fields and scroll down and look for the parameter I just created, rebar estimates, add it to the schedule, hit OK. And now the rebar estimate shows up, and it shows me also the value. I need to still add the one for B3. Yes, I want to apply it to all the B3 beams. So now I've got a nice little summary here, and it's documented very well so that by the time I get to construction, I can refer back to the schedule and be like, oh yes, in the beginning, this is what I thought the rebar weight is going to be for each of my types of beams. So when you then get to construction, you might have a rebar schedule. So this one is a rebar schedule for beam 1 that has been produced. It looks something like this. And in addition to the bending information, I want to create a, let me just pause this. So in addition to the bending information, I want to also create a schedule that shows the rebar weights. So in this example, I'm going to demonstrate how to create a global parameter. So there's quite a few steps involved with this one, but I'll just talk through it. This video will be available again on YouTube if you do need to review it. The global parameter I'm going to create is going to be the density for rebar. And that is used for all projects. So with that parameter, I can then create a calculated parameter, use that density, multiply it with the volume to get the mass of rebar in this beam 1. So I'm creating a new schedule over here now. It's going to be a rebar schedule, and in the schedule, the information I want is the partition to tell me which beam it is. I need type, I need the volume of reinforcement. And then I'm just going to indicate which beam I want to include, how I want to sort it. Okay, add the totals for the volume so that it adds up the volume of each rebar size. And now I'm going to start with creating the global parameter by creating a shared parameter first. So this is going to be my rebar density, which is, for now, I'm leaving it as a number just to make it a bit easier in terms of the units. And then I'm going to create a project parameter that is shared. So now you see the rebar density is, parameter is available. It's a type parameter, and I want to be able to use it in my structural rebar category. Okay, so I'll hit OK and OK. So now if I select this bar and I go to edit type, I can see rebar density, which is the parameter I just created, is available, and I can now create a global parameter. We'll call it rebar density. It's going to be just a number, and I can add a value, 7,850. And now when I go to edit type, go to rebar density, I can select to apply the global parameter that I just created to that value. So what you need to do now is apply this global parameter to each of the types of rebar that you have. So now when I go to my fields and scroll down, I will find the rebar density parameter that I just created, add it to the schedule. And now I can create a calculated value called rebar weight. And to calculate this, I need to multiply the reinforcement volume with the rebar density. And if I hit OK, you'll see that I get this error message, inconsistent units. So a trick here is to just divide by 1. When you do that in a calculated field, it basically makes the number unitless. So you can see that there's no units attached to that rebar weight over there. Okay, so I still need to specify the rebar weight for the Y10 bar. So after selecting the Y10 bar, I will go to my type properties and then assign the global parameter rebar density to it. And now you can see that the density and weight is populated for all the types of rebar. Here you can see a summary, and you can add or change the value. So you can see once I change the value here, it updates in the schedule automatically. If I change it back, you can see it changes back in the schedule. So this is a nice way of controlling the calculated information in your schedule so that you don't have to go back every time and update the field separately, or maybe information changes at some stage. For some odd reason, the rebar becomes heavier. You can change it in one place and it will update anyway. So a nice thing, a nice global parameter to have, for example, is cost. So you can have your cost for each type of material as a global parameter, and then when you're doing your cost calculations, use that in your calculated formulas to present the cost of the various materials. Okay, and then just lastly, I know we almost kind of over time, so this is the last bit of information, and it's really just once you've set up your schedules the way that you want in terms of appearance, in terms of the fields that you want to use. It takes a little bit of time in the beginning, but once you've got it set up, you can reuse it multiple times on all your future projects. There's a few ways to do it, but probably the best way is just to insert the view by file. So when you're in any view in your Revit model and you go to the Insert tab, you're able to use the Insert File button right on the end, and then it allows you to select the Revit file that you want to copy or insert a view from, and then you can go and you can select the various schedules that you want to include in your project. So these are schedules that are commonly used, like door schedules, window schedules, or area schedules. So you could also have them in a template, but if they are not in a template, you can then use this insert method. What I've become used to is just simply copying and pasting the schedule from one project to another while both projects are open in the same application. And this just makes scheduling a lot quicker and easier, so you don't have to recreate the new schedules all the time. There are some limitations in terms of what gets copied over. So just be aware of that. And then, so only another thing is also that only the format and the settings are copied over, but no element information. So once you copy a schedule over from one project to another, you have to then basically tell Revit which elements you want to read the information from. So something like that, if you're working across a team, it's good to have some kind of standard and communicate with each other, especially the person who created the schedule, how to use it and how to adapt it to your new project. Okay. Oh, and then another limitation also is that schedule keys can't be copied over. Yeah. Okay. So then just to recap, we talked about a lot of things. I hope I didn't lose anyone, especially those who are not particularly familiar with schedules. But just to recap, we talked about building information, how critical it is, and that you really just want to have the information presented correctly and make it accessible to the right people. We also talked about different ways that you can change the appearance of the schedule to suit your company standard, and then also the new features that are available that makes it a lot easier to work with big schedules. We then looked at a few of the different types of schedules, in particular material takeoffs, note blocks, sheets, and view lists. That is quite handy when you are planning your sheet names and your sheet numbers. You can create placeholders and come back and then apply those names and numbers to the sheet when you do create it. We also looked at embedded and keynote schedules, which are both a type of quantity schedule. And then we looked at parameters for schedules. We did a little bit of an overview of what parameters is. There's a lot more that goes into it, but understanding how to create parameters allows you to make your schedules a lot more useful, and especially for something like quantity tracking. And then we looked at how to create a global parameter for information that will be applicable for all your projects, relating to densities and cost in particular. And then we also looked at how you can reuse the schedules. You can have them saved in your templates, or you can simply use the insert files tool to copy schedules from one project to another. And then before I leave you, I also just wanted to highlight some top, or what I think is the top 5 tips and tricks. And I think number 1 would be organize your project browser. This becomes extremely valuable when you're working on a big project and you've got almost 100 schedules. So when you organize your project browser, you're able to find the schedules a lot quicker and save yourself a little bit of frustration. And then number 2 is make use of global parameters, especially when you're working with calculations, because it helps you to keep track of the information, especially if there could possibly be changes, or if you need to review any values that you use in your calculations. Another trick is to use the divide by 1 in calculated parameters. So if you get an error telling you that your calculation units are inconsistent, make it unitless by dividing the parameter by 1. And then I didn't mention this before, but a nice thing to also do with your schedules is to distinguish between working and construction schedules. So you might have some schedules that you use on sheets and issue for construction, but then you also might have some working schedules that you use to review your work. And where that would come in handy is if you want to check for things like code compliance or highlight any critical design information, you can then use conditional formatting in your working schedules that will highlight instances where you have gone above limits, or you're too low on an area, or something of the sort. And if you do this in the right way, if you do it in an intentional manner, it also helps you to inform your future design decisions, because you can always go back on your previous projects and see how close were my estimates to what I actually issued. And in that way, you are better prepared to make estimates for your future projects. And you might end up like this guy in the office, and able to pick up mistakes, or maybe areas in your design that you can brush up on to make it to make your workflow a bit easier. Okay, so now I would just like to open up for some questions if there are any. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. Okay, so then I am not going to take up too much more time. So I will then just leave you with some of our contact information. If you do have any questions at some other stage, or you would like to get in contact with us, we have offices in both Joburg and in Cape Town. And if you need some support or help with anything, our support email is up on the screen. Otherwise, get in touch with us on social media. We're always posting updates and any new events that are coming up. And yeah, with that, I would just like to thank you guys for joining me on this Friday afternoon. I hope you learned something, and you can take at least 1 or 2 things away and implement it in your workflows. But otherwise, have a good weekend, and I'm just checking. Oh, no, not a question. So yeah, have a good weekend and maybe chat soon. Bye.